Am I
Hello, sir.
audible?
Uh, yes, yes, you are audible. Yeah.
Okay.
So let me give me a moment, sir. I will
Yeah.
introduce you to the participants,
Okay.
and then we can start. So good morning to all. So now I would like to introduce our speaker, Professor Vinod Pare. He is currently professor at IIT Kanpur, and he has over 3 decades of experience in the field of environmental engineering. And he is very well known and renowned person in the field of environmental engineering, and specifically he is the founding head of Seaganga River Basin Management and Studies. And he has headed many projects of national importance, and he has contributed immensely to the national development in the field of environmental engineering. And we are very honored to have him with us today. So it is pleasure having you, sir. So
Thank
he
you.
is going to speak on the topic Earth a powerful tool for management of water-related activities for sustainable development. So over to you, sir. Yeah, yeah, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Um, Welcome and greetings from the Center for Ganga River Basin Management and Studies at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. I'm very delighted to participate in this faculty development program, which is focused on smart cities, infrastructure, and sustainability. Of course, sustainable development is the buzzword that everybody uses these days. But the question is, how do we take that concept of sustainable development in our context, in Indian context, on the ground? And this is what I would like to discuss with you, try to convey to you whatever ideas that I have based on, and these are not my ideas actually. I can say I am lucky enough to engage with many people at the in the national level, international level, and whatever I actually would convey to you, these are more a gist or gathering or collation of the views and understanding that has been developed on this subject. Of course, when we talk about sustainable development, science and technology is one, but if you need to bring that onto the ground, if you need to take it to the grassroots, to the people, that they understand the meaning of sustainable development, we need to be a little more philosophical as well. And we also have to approach or look at what our traditional knowledge is, what our wisdom is, traditional wisdom is, what do we get from our ancient literatures, and how we can combine the understandings, learnings that we get from the ancient literature, as well as the concept that we study in the institutes like IITs, NITs, and several such institutions. And as a faculty, what are we expected to communicate? How can we create next generation of people, our young students? How can they learn from what we got, and how they do not repeat the same mistakes that our generation did it for the future. So this is something that I would like to highlight through this. So as I said, focus is on smart cities, but how can we make smart cities? In fact, the subheading of that, the infrastructure and sustainability. To me, this itself is a contradictory to each other. Okay, because we have set of people who talk about what kind of infrastructure should be there to make smart cities. But then, in order to build that infrastructure, the sustainability only remains as a buzzword but does not get actually implemented. Okay, to give you an example, uh, this is what we talk about smart cities. I hope whatever is on the screen is visible to everybody. So, when we talk about smart cities, we basically talk about four aspects of it: the physical infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, the social infrastructure, and the institutional infrastructure. And you can see a number of items that are listed around the circle of the the four elements that we talk about: physical, economic, social, and institutional. Okay, nowhere, in my opinion, we only talk about the facilities that we provide, but where is the concept of sustainability? Okay, we talk about housing, we talk about connectivity, we talk about cyber connection, we talk about multimodal transport, we talk about sewerage, solid waste, water supply, bringing in power. We talk about GDP growth, we talk about job creation, livelihood, market. In the institutional framework, again, we talk about various kind of things, whether it is citizen advisory, people participation. Very vaguely, we mention about environmental sustainability. But what are the actions that are required to this? And does it not, on the face of it, looks conflicting with each other? That on one side we want to develop make more smart cities and create these kind of four elements, and sustainability and environment is just mentioned, in my opinion, as a passing remark, as a buzzword, so that we look more fashionable, that we are also concerned about the environment. But do we really have any actionable plan on these, making these smart cities, so far as the sustainability is concerned and so far as the environment protection is concerned? And do we really are we in a position to connect the development with the sustainability? Okay. And this is what I would like to focus on by taking an example of water. Of course, in the physical infrastructure, we do have items like sewerage, solid waste management, water supply. Okay, but then if you really look at and the way we include these things, it is essentially kind of providing infrastructure for wastewater collection and wastewater treatment. Similarly, solid waste collection, conveyance, and transport, and water supply. But do we really, and when we talk about water supply, we essentially talk about how can we provide 24/7 water supply, how can we have a distribution system, and so on and so forth. But the major question that we have, from where the water is going to come to us? Okay, and are we really talking about the most of the smart city plans that I have seen, or we have engaged in various discussion? Nowhere there is a focus on water in totality. Water in totality. And when we say water in totality, do we really understand about the water within the boundaries of the smart city, if we have a boundary of the smart city which is more an administrative boundary rather than the natural boundaries. And again, I will also focus on what is the difference between administrative boundaries and the natural boundaries. As scientists, engineers, be hydrologists, whether we are environmentalists or whatever, we all know the nature works on natural boundaries, and the natural boundary could be a river basin, it could be aquifer boundary. So natural systems work on natural boundaries. Environmental systems by and large work on natural boundaries, but our actions are essentially on administrative boundaries. And the administrative boundaries, like from the top, we start with the country, then go to the states, and from the states we go to the districts, and the districts has number of cities as well as a number of blocks, and the blocks have a number of gram panchayats, and each gram panchayat has number of villages, and so on and so forth. Okay, so so when I have to take an action, I take it through administrative boundaries, but the nature understands only its own boundaries, that is called as natural boundary. And so how do we kind of marry these two things? That an action point of view, we need a administrative boundary, and for understanding purposes, to look at nature, to look at environment, we have to work through the natural boundaries. And that is what I would like to highlight to somebody. And just to give you a passing remark, if you look at the developmental activities that we have taken so far, what are the consequences? These are just the example that I have given. Okay, and since I focus more on water, obviously the example of water comes to me, but this is also true with respect to all our other natural resources that we need to worry about. So if you look at impact of developmental activities, we know where we are today. I don't have to highlight that. We all know what is the condition of our water bodies. Okay, be it rivers, be it drains. In fact, drains though we have given up. Okay, drains, I think this generation, drain means only a nala, and nala is also a dirty nala which flows only sewage or wastewater into that. So our this generation and the next generation onwards probably will have the concept of drains means a dirty nala only. But you all remember, scientifically, drains are part of the river systems. Okay, the smaller ones we call it a drain, and the drains are very important to look at the drainage. Okay, and this we see once in a while. Either it is small rains that you have, and we find our cities are flooded completely, and that's because we have not worried about protecting those drains, and then it essentially leads to choking of those drains, accumulation. And even though the rainfall or precipitation is not really very abnormal, of course we do keep blaming to the climate change. For every flood, for every issue that we have a very convenient way of putting the whole thing on a climate change. Oh, this is due to climate change. But believe me, most of the things are not the impacts of the climate change that the problem that we have. It is because the way we have developed our cities, towns, villages, and the infrastructure, we have ignored the natural structures, and the drains are very important. Okay, only rivers is not the only thing that we need to look at. Rivers, their tributaries and sub-tributaries, and eventually if you look at a small channel that may flow in front of your house or where you are residing or in the colony that you are residing, it is actually meant for carrying the the surface runoff, and invariably because we have ignored it, we have made it into only a wastewater, so it remains as a drain. And as soon as we say drain, the picture that comes to us is only of a dirty drain which is flowing, stinking, and this is across these days in India. When we talk to any person, nala, but when we were in the school, to us, we used to go to see the drains during the monsoon period, how they are flooded, how the water comes, and so on and so forth. While most of the time they used to remain dry. Similarly, ponds, lakes, reservoirs, and wetlands. So we have completely forgotten about. Okay, wetlands, we think something which is a wasteful allocation of lands. Okay, and wherever there is an opportunity, we try to make sure that that area is recovered, encroached, and we make big buildings or markets or whatever. And so role of wetlands we have completely forgotten. Okay, so this is one with respect to water, the condition that we see, and this is all because in the name of development. It's not that we have not been talking about sustainable development. In fact, if you recall, our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi gave a very nice speech in 1972 at the United Nations about the sustainable development. Okay, and it is now almost 50 years then. Okay, where are we in terms of sustainable approach for sustainable development, or we are just still talking about in the conferences, or have we done anything in the name of sustainable development? Another good example, we talk about green revolution of the Punjab in 1970s, 80s. We are very proud to have made our country food secured and excess food grains that we produce. But then look at the end result of that. So what I have quoted is the report from the studies that were executed by the Niti Aayog, and see what they are saying about 21 cities in India, including Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad, will run out of groundwater by 2020, affecting around 100 million people. It also said that 40% of India's population will have no access to drinking water by 2030. And these are not exaggerated figures. We are already seeing the symptoms of that. Somehow our cities, which we call it as smart cities, we have learned to import water. And these days, if you look at it, almost every city gets its water by transporting not less than 50 kilometers. Not less than 50 kilometers if you take average of that. Be it Indore, be it Bhopal, be it Bangalore, be it Delhi, any city that you have. While Delhi has a Yamuna flowing through it, yet it brings in water from Ganga, which does not go through Delhi. Okay, so we import, so as if Yamuna water was not sufficient for Delhi, and that's because we have made the condition of the river in such a way that that water is there. So we have not looked at making these rivers sustainable, making these water bodies sustainable, and that's the reason why we are facing this acute problem. So most of the places, surface water bodies are dried up, we don't have, and as a result, because we learn the tube well technologies we implemented, and the pumping water became so easy for us. Everywhere we can easily put pump, but forgot about the energy that is required to do that, and also whether it is possible for us to continuously take groundwater, and that is the storage of millions of years of water, and we consume that in maybe 3 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades, or at the most in a century. So are we talking about sustainability? What will happen? And this is the effect anyway that we are seeing. So it's very important for us to understand this. And if you look at the historical perspective on the environment protection, okay, we have gone through various phases. I will not elaborate on that. Like for example, our first reaction to take care of the pollution was the dilution. Then of course we realized that dilution is not enough everywhere, be it of air or be it of water, okay, because we can see the rivers and the drains dirty because there is not enough water to dilute the wastewaters that produce. So we moved from dilution to purification, and then in the name of purification we do have today the state of the art says that we can have very advanced wastewater treatment systems, and theoretically or practically also I can produce almost distilled water or any quality of water that I require, be it from ocean water or be it from sewage or any kind of effluent. But the question is, at what cost? What cost, both in terms of energy, both in terms of the other land resources that are required, okay, and we have now seen the limits of that as well, okay. So the purification work alone is not going to help us. And then we next phase we are talking about is the reuse and recycling. This is also going on for at least another 40-50 years we have been talking about, but how much actually we do on the ground, how feasible it is another thing, okay. And now of course we realize that we need to ask this question, is the adverse environmental consequence is necessary for us, okay, and we try to minimize that. And by and large, our reaction to environmental issues has been in the name of the tool, very powerful tool that we developed. We started talking about it since 1970s, is the environmental impact assessment, EIA. But I think this EIA tool has given us a false impression of the protection of the environment. It is more a reactive tool, okay, that I will plan a project, I will plan my activity, and then look at its environmental impact assessment. So it is not built into our developmental process, because once I plan an activity, why would I like to show an adverse impact of it? And that has been the tragedy, okay. So this is what I'm saying, though we keep very proudly saying we have an environmental impact assessment mechanism, all projects get evaluated, but is that going to lead us to any way of sustainable development? And that is something that we need to ponder over, okay. And that is where I would like to put before you a slightly different approach considering this. And that's why I thought taking water as an example, I will try to illustrate the learnings that I have in the last 40-50 years of my professional life, more particularly in the last 10 years when I got opportunity and engagement to prepare the Ganga River Basin Management Plan. and we continue to interact with the government as a knowledge body on this subject. So how can we change our future generation using this? Okay, and for that it is important to understand what is the meaning of the word Earth Ganga. Okay, and what I have said, it is a very, very powerful tool for management of water related activities. Okay, and that can then lead to sustainable development. In fact, this word or this phrase was coined by none other than our honorable Prime Minister in the first Ganga Council meeting that was held in 2019 in Kanpur. Okay, this is where he coined this phrase Earth Ganga. And subsequently at Sea Ganga and with various discussions, I realized that this is probably the most powerful vehicle, tool, or communication mechanism for us to achieve the goals of sustainable development, at least with respect to water. And this is what I would like to convey to you through the next hour or so that is available to use. Okay, so we'll first try to understand meaning of both Earth Ganga and the sustainable development that we know. Okay, so we all know what is the definition of sustainable development. Okay, I don't have to go through it. On the left side, what you see is a development approach which we now call it as inappropriate development, because any development which has an adverse effect on environment cannot be called as a proper development or sustainable development. So development that adversely impacts environment is something that is of concern, and if the environment is impacted, that is whether it is our water bodies or whether it is our air or terrestrial environment, it actually undermines the health of the system, including not only of the human beings but also all kinds of life form and the other non-living things as well. So inappropriate development leads to adverse impact on environment, and that actually undermines the health. Okay, and if the system is not healthy, whether it is biotic component or abiotic component, if that is not healthy, how can the development continue? And that has an impact on the development itself, and that is what it say, it slows down the development. And if the development is slowed down, it further has adverse impact on the environment now. Okay, and this is a kind of process wherein environment is increasingly getting damaged, nature is increasingly getting affected, and this is where we have realized now that we cannot continue, but we have no clue on how do we go about changing that. Though we have talked about sustainable development, and the real spirit of the sustainable development is that we take up only those activities which improves the environment. But even today, though we talk about sustainable development, our focus is always on building infrastructure, building facilities. Okay, and we are kind of living on a false impression that we are talking about sustainable development. But the real meaning of the sustainable development means that ecology is the focus of our development and economy is a byproduct of it. But still, nowhere we keep ecology as a focus. Our focus of development continues to be economy. And ecology or environment, if at all it is there, that is considered as a byproduct. And if that is the ecology or environment is a byproduct, an example that I gave you, EIA is that kind of tool which recognizes, which acknowledges that environment is a byproduct of developmental activity. I have to do development and there will be some impact of it, and that I will take care of it through the tool that I have, whether I call it as environmental impact assessment or environmental audit or whatever n number of buzzwords we have. But that is not really going to lead us to sustainable development. So the development that improves the environment is something that we can call it as ecology focus or environment focus. And if environment and ecology is maintained, that will encourage development, and that will improve the health of the people. And if the health of the people and health of the system is maintained, and then it should be possible for us to sustain that kind of development. And that is the real meaning. Now the question is, how do we implement that concept of sustainable development with respect to the cities? And we now have every country is talking about the sustainable development goals, UN SDGs. There are a number of sustainable development goals, 16 or so, okay, and some of them, SDG 6, focuses more on the urbanizations, sewage, water, and so on and so forth. And that is where we essentially all the time talk about SDG 6 when we talk about from the point of view of smart cities or sustainability, sustainable houses or habitat or whatever. Okay. Now, what do we understand by that? And it should not remain only as a buzzword, only to talk about in conferences, but we do not take this to the grassroots, to the people at large. Okay. So that's very important, and this is where I thought Earth Ganga, the phrase that has given to us by our Prime Minister, is a very powerful communication tool, and also can be understood very easily. Okay, basically it is translates into start valuing water and transform Ganga. Okay. Transform Ganga does not necessarily mean that we physically improve the Ganga. There is a lot of things. And what does Ganga means to us? Okay, Ganga is not, when we talk about Earth Ganga, okay, Ganga just does not mean one river that we know of, whose origin is Gangotri, or you go back a little further to Gaumukh, and something that confluences with the ocean in Ganga Sagar. So Ganga is not that physical entity that we are talking about, which originates from Gangotri and flows up to Ganga Sagar. Not even if you want to expand, we want to say that no, Ganga also includes the other head streams, be it Alaknanda, be it Nandakini, be it Dhali Ganga or whatever, okay, Mandakini. But that is also not the whole meaning of Ganga. Ganga is actually to be taken as a representative of all rivers. Ganga, our culture is Ganga culture. And what does that Ganga culture means? It means we treat every river as Ganga. Every river is in fact, if you go to places where there is no Ganga physically, when we are in south, whether it is Kaveri or Narmada or Shipra or whatever, or when we are taking in the house, those we believe in some kind of spiritual thing, we always say while taking bath or deep into the water, be it in a pond or reservoir or a flowing water body, we always say Har Har Gange. Okay, so Ganga is a symbol of all rivers for us. Okay, and that is the meaning that has to be taken with respect to Ganga. So Ganga does not mean only one river. Ganga is Ganga represents the culture of Indian rivers, and not only Indian rivers, probably in this whole region, Ganga is taken in that way. Okay, even we go to Sri Lanka or Nepal or wherever, the rivers are taken in that spirit so far as the spirit is concerned. So when I say Ganga, Ganga does not mean only one river. Ganga is represents the spirit or the culture of rivers in this region. And that is why when we talk about Ganga, Ganga includes all rivers. And in that context, Ganga means thousands of streams. Even in the Ganga basin that when we talk about, we say Ganga originates from Gangotri or Alaknanda, whatever is the origin, just upstream of Badrinath or Mandakini, upstream of Kedarnath or like that. But actually Ganga origin are numerous origins, right? For example, if you look at from scientific perspective, the river Shipra, and a tributary of river Shipra is river Khan in Indore. Okay, now that is also part of the Ganga, because eventually the river Khan, which is now locally known as Saraswati and Chandrabhaga, actually joins Shipra. Shipra then joins Chambal. Chambal then joins Yamuna, and Yamuna then becomes part of Ganga. So in that spirit, that small river or tributary is also Ganga and is one of the origins of Ganga. And like this, if you look at number of streams which eventually go and meet Ganga are part of the origins of the Ganga. And that is the spirit with which we have to look at Ganga. And as I said, Ganga is not just that physical entity that we know of. Ganga is representative of the culture of Indian rivers, be it Kaveri, be it Narmada or whatever. And it is in that way. Then the next thing is, what is earth? Okay, earth is not restricted only to the economic sense of it. When we talk about earth, we are actually talking about the comprehensive meaning. And one of the meaning of the earth is meaning itself. Okay, so we are talking about earth and of course the economic aspects of it. So Earth Ganga is a very larger perspective, and if you can communicate that to the people, and people by and large understand that, and that is why I thought Earth Ganga is a very powerful kind of communication tool to protect our river. And in fact, we had the last India Water Impact Summit, which Sea Ganga and NMCG organizes every year. The main focus was on this topic, that is Earth Ganga. How do we take this concept of Earth Ganga and use it as a powerful tool? Invariably you will see that when we talk about river, so the concept of Earth Ganga is river conservation, synchronized development. So remember, we said ecology should be the focus, environment should be the focus, and that is why when we talk about development should accommodate river conservation. So the focus should be river conservation. And why I am saying that is, if the rivers are not protected, if the water is not available, how can there be a city? How can be there human settlement without water? Okay, if the rivers are not protected, if water is not available, how will we talk about smart cities, right? So protecting or conserving rivers and water bodies. And when I say river is also not just the channel that we talk about. River is a system, and system means all your kinds of water bodies, whether it is reservoirs, whether it is ponds, lakes, wetlands, or even groundwater for that matter. Because many of our rivers are perennial, because there is substantial contribution of groundwater into the main channel during the non-monsoon period. Okay, so in the monsoon period, groundwater gets recharged, and that water slowly flows into the river, and that is what makes the river sustainable. Even Ganga or Yamuna, we say they are perennial because of the snow melt. But those who have studied this, you all know snow melt is a very small contribution into the flow. The major flow that comes in is through the springs, through the groundwater, and that is why these rivers are sustainable. And now, why do we see these rivers drying at places? Okay, fortunately, it has not happened with Ganga so far. Okay, and it is time for us to talk. But many of our rivers, which were perennial, now we see dry patches somewhere. Even Yamuna, the same thing would probably happen, but we are having living in a false kind of thing, because we are discharging all our wastewaters into the drains and then flows into the Yamuna. So downstream of Delhi and essentially right up to the confluence of Chambal to Yamuna, the river essentially carries wastewater. It is basically a drain. And so in Delhi, it is no more a river worth calling a river. Okay, and that is what we are. And if I need to sustain these rivers, I need to make sure the river system is protected, river system is conserved, and that is what river conservation means. And any development that has to take place, that should be a byproduct of the process of conservation of the river, and only then that development is something which we can say will be sustainable, can go on for ever, and that is what in real sense we can call it as sustainable development. Okay, but the face of it, it looks as if we have two powerful sides, which is represented by the two lions here. Okay, one side represents more like faith leaders, civil society organizations, and they talk or they agitate or whatever that you can call or work for river conservation. And this set of people or institutions essentially work on traditional knowledge and wisdom, and they have a long-term perspective. On the other hand, those who talk about development, okay, and these are basically people representing industries, businesses, contractor groups, and so on and so forth, right? And they talk more on so-called modern science, which we learn these days or understand these days in the institutions like ours. Okay, but invariably they have a perspective which is a short term or medium term at the most, and they only talk about giving jobs, GDP growth, and so on and so forth. And it looks as if these two are fighting with each other. So river conservation on one side and development on the other side. But truly speaking, if you really look at it, they should be the two faces of the same coin. And that is what we try to communicate the meaning of the Earth Ganga. Earth Ganga means river conservation, synchronized development, and that means development and conservation should be seen as two faces of the same coin. Okay, and then how can we actually implement that? So the guiding principles are, yes, we use the modern science, whatever scientific investigation, knowledge, technologies, solutions that we develop, but when we take it onto the ground, we should do that with traditional wisdom. And I will illustrate this with the traditional, and this is what I said. Some of it may be more philosophical to you, but that's very important. Okay, and we have been talking about other very guiding principle we say about it, but then how do we implement it? That is, think globally, okay, but start acting locally. Okay, and the third very valuable principle is we believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's what our Prime Minister keeps saying everywhere. Okay, that we do not want to create boundaries. Our nature is not of expanding. Our nature is not of conquering anybody's land or whatever. Okay, we consider everybody to be part of one family. So that's a very important and powerful concept that we have. Okay, but then let us start taking the responsibility in the name of Vasudhaiva Kupatangupam to start with, in true sense, your family, little more than that, talk about the community, the locality in which you live, and the city. Do we really own the city that we live in? Do we talk about just my own benefits in infrastructure, or do we have a concept that no, this kind of infrastructure and facilities that I want today should also be available for future generations to come? And if that is what is the concept, how can I make sure that whatever I do, the ability of the future generation is not compromised? And how can we do that if you do not conserve water bodies? Can we say that ability of the future generation is not compromised for development if I am not maintaining Yamuna like Yamuna, not maintaining Ganga like Ganga, not maintaining every drain for the purpose it is meant for, all water bodies that we used to have in our cities? Have you encroached them? Have you made them as dump sites for your solid waste? Have you filled up those sites and then made big shopping malls or colonies there? Okay, so is this can we call? And if that has happened, then where the water, because that is not going to stop. Okay, so the rainwater is going to come. Where will that go? That will accumulate and come into your houses, and then we say, oh, it's a nature problem. It's not natural problem of the nature. It's our own creation. And how do we take care of it? So this is what. So these are very powerful guiding principles to realize the concept of Earth Ganga. And then, in order to do that, we need to talk about some kind of instruments and drive mechanism. And one of the very powerful mechanism is faith or belief. Okay, and this is where we are very strong on it, and I think we should use that very effectively. And of course, the last is the fear of God. But now we have advanced so much that God we feel is just a stone, a statue of made out of a stone. There is nothing like God. So that fear is gone to us, right? Okay. So we have now progressed in the sense that we have lost the fear of the God. Okay, but that is a very, very powerful driving mechanism or instrument. So we have to have faith, belief, or fear of God. If not fear of God, then of course we talk about community and the society, or the fear of law, fear of being arrested, fear of being punished, put into jail as a criminal activity or whatever. Okay, so these are the driving force, and of course we need to use them very judiciously, and this is where another important thing. The solutions of course come from science and technology, the new novel solutions that we develop, but then all those solutions have to be taken to the masses with wisdom, and that comes from our traditional knowledge and experience. And this is what I started in the beginning, saying that how do we combine the modern science with the traditional wisdom or the knowledge. And of course we require resources, physical, cash or kind. So how do we then make those economic instruments? And as I said, the first two are more to take care of the sustainability, that is the ecology or the natural systems. Protection is the focus, and the last point should be coming from as a byproduct of the whole thing. Okay, and slowly I will elaborate on that. So this has been imbibed in the Ganga River Basin Management Plan that we have submitted to the government. That was our major guiding principle, that use modern science and new technologies, but with traditional wisdom, or what we call it as combined Gyan Dhara with the Janadhyan. Okay, so that's very important. And whichever corner of the country, how old, whatever old it is, I think we need to take that and then include that in our river basin plan. So the first thing that comes in is I will give you how our ancient literature supports that kind of thing. Okay, and this has been quoted while we prepared the Ganga River Basin Management Plan, and the government uses this very effectively. Even in some of the publications that the Prime Minister uses, he quotes this from the from the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, what it basically says is the god is explaining its various forms, and then it says I am in Ganga. Okay, when he says Stot Samasmi Jannavi. Okay, so this is the shlok from Bhagavad Gita, verse 31 of the chapter 10. It says Pavanaha Pavtamasmi Ramaha Shastra Bhrutamaham. That means among the purifying things I am the wind, among the warriors I am the Rama, and then amongst the creature I am the crocodile, and amongst the river I am Ganga. And as I said, Ganga is not to be taken in a very narrow spirit. Ganga is representative of all rivers. So if that kind of faith that we have, if that is what we have, so if we believe that something is godlike for us, obviously we will not do anything which is improper with that particular entity. And this will have to keep on telling to our future generations that we cannot forget this. And that is why all rivers, water bodies, ponds, reservoirs that we have a practice of worshipping has to be kept intact. Only then there is a chance that people will understand its importance, and people will not destroy them, spoil them. Okay. We may talk about water quality. Okay, we may have developed several kinds of parameters like BOD, COD, pH, colorability, conductivity. We all understand those parameters, right? But how do I communicate that in a very simple way? And this is where again our ancient literature allows us to explain that. And this is, we say that all surface water bodies have these qualities of water. Asya jalasya gunaha shitatvam swadutvam swachhatvam atyanta ruchatvam pattatvam pavanatvam. So all these qualities are part of and they are explained very simplistically to the people, and then they realize that yes, something which gives us such a good quality of water, which takes care of so many aspects us. It is not the groundwater which takes care of us in that fashion. It is the surface water, and that is why we any pond we take bath in, natural ponds or lakes or reservoirs or rivers. This is what is the faith that we have, and this is quoted in our ancient literature, right? So we need to take that effectively and communicate, because if you talk about BOD, COD to the common people, they will not understand. So their faith has to be maintained that the surface water qualities are superior and they need to be protected. Somehow over the period of time, we scientifically have given a wrong message that groundwater is better compared to surface waters, right? And this is what has happened over last 40-50 years, because surface waters and the waters in the river look so dirty and also has become very dirty, and so we gave. But we all know groundwater is not that good. Somewhere we have arsenic, somewhere we have fluoride, somewhere we have total dissolved solid, somewhere we have something. So that is not something which can actually, even for agriculture purposes, the salinity aspects that we have increased and spoiled our agricultural land. And in fact, today water is as much a problem with agriculture, but more problem with agriculture now is because of the soil. because of the degradation of the soil, and that has happened because of our practices of bringing in more groundwater, increasing the salinity. So that we do not really understand, and so this is again a very powerful thing. The next important thing, which again we have quoted in Ganga River Basin Management Plan, I don't think we can develop any modern protocol or standard so simple, so comprehensive than what is written there in this particular shlok, which is a compilation from Brahman Puranam, okay, which says Gangam Punyajalam Prapyam Chaturdasha Vivarjayat. 14 actions are prohibited, and look at what are those actions. The first one is says Shaucham, okay, that means defecation in water body is prohibited. Unfortunately, we use this in a very wrong way. Okay, in fact, I took this when I listened to one of the first chairman of the Central Pollution Control Board, that was Nilay Chaudhary. Dr. Nilay Chaudhary is no more. Okay, and he used to quote this and saying this, that this is why we need effluent discharge standards in water. But I think this is slightly incorrectly understood at that time. It says it is prohibited, right? So by having a standard of 30 BOD or 100 COD or whatever, we are kind of legalizing defecation into water bodies. Okay, so that is something that so this prohibition that is written, these are the 14 actions. So even our religious practice or spiritual practice or ancient literature does not say that flowing of dead bodies into the river is acceptable. In fact, it says it is prohibited. But somewhere when we are communicating this to the people, we have given a very different kind of message. So I think this is a very important thing which covers all aspects. So these are the actions which are prohibited, and I think if we can have this as a spirit of all our norms for protecting rivers, that is very simple and can communicate very well. Another important thing that we need to understand, every river is different, and this is also explained very simply in our ancient literature, right? What does it say? Trivihi saraswatam toyam saptahena tu yamunam sadhya punati gangeyam darshanadeva narmadam. What it says is, in Narmada, if you just salute it, if you just do pranam from a distance, it gives you as much benefit, or it cleans all your sin as it would be if you take deep into river Ganga, or bath in Saraswati for 3 days, or in Yamuna for 7 days. The idea is not to compare or show that one river or one god is superior to the other. It gives you a scientific message that different rivers have different geological, geomorphological and ecological settings, right? And how human beings should interact with that kind of river. It says it is not good for people to go and take deep in river Narmada, because those of you who have seen the settings of Narmada, it is not safe for people to take deep in Narmada. Okay, also from the river point of view, you cannot do what you do with Ganga and Yamuna with Narmada. If Narmada is polluted once, it will be very difficult to recover that river. And so what this particular shlok essentially says is, every river or every water body has to be respected in its own sense, right? And idea is not to compare or say one river is more superior or one god is more superior than other, but this is basically communicating that every natural system has a different setting, and the human interaction or human behavior with respect to that natural entity has to be seen from the ecological or environmental perspective. The last example that I will give you is this. We all have learned this mythological story or whatever that you call it, how Ganga was originated, right? And when Ganga was to come onto the earth surface, it would have had a very high impact and then would have destroyed many things. And that is where we learn that the Lord Shankar controlled that momentum by locking it into its jatas. Okay. Okay. So this is, we need to understand what is the meaning of this. Okay. Now when we talk about the forest cover, we talk about the roots. So make an analogy between this. Why trees are important, why forests are important, and more particularly wherever we have originating streams. Okay, and that actually helps in controlling the flow in the river. Otherwise, you will have more erosion, more rapid flow, and this is one of the slogans that we are using. Our main challenge today in water management is how do we ensure that the rapid flow is converted into a sluggish flow. Okay, and that is we can learn from this. And much of our problem with the water management is this. If you all know, this is the typical variation in the rainfall that we have across the country, and you can see that much of the rainfall we get only during the month of June, July and August, and all other period, of course the variation is very different in local regions, and we can work on that. So this we have to keep it and connect it to the previous example that I gave you. How do we, so our main challenge in water management is how do we make sure that the uneven distribution that we have of the rainfall, that is converted, that is made slow, and that means we make sure that as much it goes into the ground, more particularly in the where it falls. If that can percolate down to the ground, then that can be made available to us in the form of a slow flow, and that is what can recharge our surface water bodies and can make sure that they are perennial. So this is translating that into our current scientific understanding is this. So how do we take this in the sustainability manner, and how Earth Ganga can help us? Okay. So when we are talking about in the implementation level, we are saying it should be through the geographic administrative boundary. Let's plan this at the district level. So we have a macro level plan, which is Ganga River Basin Management Plan, and now the Sea Ganga's effort is essentially how do we take that to the ground. Okay, and that is means what the concepts that we have at the Ganga River Basin Management Plan, how do we take it to the district level? And that is where we can use all the programs that we have of the government. The major programs related to water sector are the Jal Jeevan Mission, or the Swachh Bharat Mission, or the Namami Gange program, which is the river cleanup project or river restoration project. And unless until we connect them, the roots of all the developmental activities that we have, be it forestry, be it tourism, be it navigation, be it energy development, be it agriculture, it has to be rooted in the rivers only. So unless until we protect the rivers and the water bodies, and that has to start right from a smaller unit, that is the district, and the district consists of the urban as well as the rural area. And this is where, as part of Earth Ganga, we are trying to develop a plan for every district, and I'll show you what kind of plan that it should be. And this is where through you I would like to submit to you that each one of us, whichever district that we have, can we think of, rather than working on the smart cities, can we think about developing a plan for a particular district with the concept of Earth Ganga. And Earth Ganga means we should get the earth, that is economic activity should develop, but the focus should be the use, and that means we need to think about multi-purpose use of water bodies, and we cannot think of multi-purpose use unless we protect the water bodies. Okay, and the navigation or tourism does not only necessarily apply when we talk about transporting things from Delhi to Allahabad to Howrah or whatever, even local transport. And if you go and see Europe and many of the European countries, how very good nicely they have developed the network of canals, water bodies. And so far as we are concerned, we only use canals only from the point of view of irrigation. We have never thought that canals can be multi-purpose. We can also use it for local transport. So is that something that is possible? And that cannot happen unless until we educate people and educate about rivers and about water. So that should be a part of the developmental activity or economic activity. So the Earth Ganga means that we need to develop these sectors, economic sectors, okay, and use these programs very powerfully, Jal Jeevan, and the other programs that we have of the government of India, whether it is Startup India, whether it is Vocal for Local, whether it is Digital India, whether it is Make in India, all these programs, how can we relate it to the sustainable development, and the focus should be on maintaining the water bodies and water management. And I'll give you some more things on this. And typically when we talk about conservation and river, and we now realize that in order to understand or manage properly, it is the natural boundary that we have there. So we talk about, for actionable point of view, it is the administrative boundary that is important, but for understanding the subject matter and nature, it is the natural boundary that is very important. And so far as the rivers are concerned, river basin is the natural boundary. Okay, and it requires a cyclic process that we start with understand first, then communicate that, because any river basin management cannot happen involving people, and when we talk about people, there are going to be different interests and different sides of it. So there is going to be conflict, and that conflict can be resolved only when sit on the table and negotiate properly. And how can we negotiate unless until we communicate the proper knowledge, and then that proper knowledge can be only created when we develop understanding. Unfortunately, for most of the river basins, we do not have this kind of thing. In fact, when you go to a small level, those of you who are involved in such kind of studies are know very well. I need a very good topographic map, right? And then that itself I do not have of a proper resolution. We use 90 meter SRTM or 60 meter SRTM or 30 meter, but those maps may be good for overall hydrological studies, but when I go to the micro level, those resolution maps are not good. Okay, and that is where and I have looked at it, not a single district, not a single city. We are talking about smart city. If you go and approach and you want to manage water, none of the city will have a proper contour map of the resolution that is required. Okay, and unless until we take drainage, water supply, sewerage, everything in hand, managing or maintaining the water bodies at a district level properly, we cannot think of this. Okay, and invariably in our river basin actions, the first three steps, which are very important steps, are forgotten. And we normally, and this has happened, I am not hesitating in saying, has happened in Jal Jeevan Mission, is happening in Jal Jeevan Mission, is happening in Swachh Bharat Mission, is also has happened and is happening in Namami Gange Mission. That we only start with the last three steps, that is design and implement, start regulating, but So whatever limited resources that we have, funds that come from the central government as a program project, so those resources we just try to distribute it and then design irrespective of whether I have a proper knowledge, and those DPRs are also of very poor quality. And that is where we are trying to kind of, if you have to go for sustainable development, this work has to expand. And that's where through this course, and that is why my interest in talking to you was that are we in a position to develop such kind of plan for every district, whichever. And this IIT Kanpur or Siganga alone cannot do it unless until all our institutions which are there in nooks and corners of the country, if each one of them can take their own district and start preparing those plans, I think 10 years down the line our story will be completely different than what we are now. Okay, but if we do not take the initiatives and understand these cyclic processes properly, the government and the bureaucratic setup will continue to do that. But if you can slowly and slowly develop this, and I have seen with my last 10 years of experience, they are willing to, but they want ready-made solutions. And science cannot develop overnight. Okay, we require time. So if we start preparing now, maybe from 5 years or 10 years down the line, we'll be in a position to implement and give more scientific. And another important aspect that we all need to realize is that there are several actors and stakeholders in this. And the bigger problem is not science and technology. The bigger problem is the de-aligned interest of that. And the de-aligned interest comes because the residence time and their interests are different. If you look at politicians, they can only think of their one term, that is 5 years. Okay, if you talk about bureaucrats, the top level bureaucrats is in office only for 1.5 years, 2 years, or maximum somebody is lucky is in the office as a secretary for 3 years. So they cannot think beyond 3 years or 5 years period. It is the technocrats. But then the technocrats are also part of various agencies, and depending upon which agency they are affiliated to, they also mold occur. And this we have seen very well in case of Corona, how the experts, if they are on the government side, how they use the same knowledge. If somebody is in the opposition, how the same expertise is used to criticize. Okay, so we should not fall into that, and that is where it is important that we need to align this interest, and instead of pushing it from all sides and then as a result we do not move anywhere, can we apply all the efforts, and that can only happen if we have a proper knowledge and proper understanding of the system. And that is where the role of academic institutions is very important. We only can develop this long-term understanding, but we have to start going to the field and start collecting information and make sure that these plants are ready. And bigger rivers cannot be revived unless until we start from the small river. And right now, as I said, our approach has been what is given in the left side. Somehow we think I can construct this kind of inverse pyramid. That is, I stop from the top order river and then go to the lower order river. This is not going to happen, but this is the approach that we adopted in Ganga Action Plan, phase 1, phase 2, or other river action plans, Yamuna Action Plan 1, Plan 2, and by and large it is also happening in the Namami Gange program. Though there is a realization, and last 2 years I have seen government now changing their attitude and saying that no, we have to talk about developing rivers of lower order, and it is this context we've been able to convince even the honorable minister that which the constituency you belong to, there is a river there, and that is in a very bad situation. So he said, and then he now keeps saying we don't have to deliver infrastructure, we have to deliver river to the people. And if we deliver river to the people, if we deliver pond or natural lake to the people, rest of the thing will follow on this. Okay, and that is where I said we need to change our approach from the top order river to the lower order river, we need to make sure that we start creating a very wide base, and then all rivers we should start thinking about. So any drain, any river which flows through a particular district, how can we make a plan to regenerate that, and then do that in that sense really. Now if you want to do this or implement the concept of Earth Ganga, there are various subjects that we need to handle, and that way it is a very multidisciplinary kind of thing, and no individual can have a multidisciplinary knowledge. We can be sensitive, and that is where a big team is required to that, and that is where in the Sea Ganga we have created different portfolios through which we work, and we encourage all institutions, all faculty members to participate, and we can work out a mechanism how everyone can contribute and gather funds for doing this kind of thing. The next important thing is we need all kinds of information and the data. What is the time? 12:17. Okay, so I think we are approaching close to the time, and I would like to show you a small example of exactly what can be practiced at a very micro level. So we need all this kind of information when we talk about river basin planning, and this kind of information we need right at the smallest micro level, that is at the district level, or that is from the administrative boundary point of view, and natural boundary point of view, it is the small river and its basin and all the water bodies within those basins. And of course we can use all the modern tools of gathering data as well as communicating that data. And we need to start a comprehensive river basin river monitoring system that also we have developed. So this slide actually illustrates it is not that only scientists and students or people who are involved can monitor. How can we engage the local people, those who are seeing, so that we reduce the cost of sampling etc. Substantially. So we need to create a nationwide network, so that will give ownership to the people. It also will give some earning for them, and then have a proper coordination. So that's another program that we are working on, river basin monitoring. Okay, so we need to understand the demand, make sure that we have water balance, and also start talking about water budget for each district. Okay, and work both on natural boundaries as well as administrative boundaries. Okay. And for that we need to create this kind of information. In the interest of time, I will not elaborate on that, but that gives you the scientific basis of how we can prepare. So far as the water demand is concerned, this is where we also again have to change our approach completely. Typically we consider water demand from the point of view of how much water is needed for various activities. Actually that is not our demand, or that is not the demand of water that we have. The actual demand of water is the one which gets lost from a particular geographic boundary, and that is only related to evaporation, evapotranspiration. And so when we try to make water balance, we should not focus only on the demand, because much of the water can be, which is required for various activities, can be circulated within the system. So when we are talking about making a plan for each districts, we have started working on some of the districts. So all this kind of information in the digital form is very useful, be it demographic, be it digital elevation model of the required resolution, be it the soil profile, where are the different activities, industry and all. So this we need to create, and then add to that is the water demand, water balance kind of study. And the last but not the least important is the objective of the Jal Jeevan Mission, wherein we are trying to keep objective of providing water to every individual household through tap. But there are challenges associated with it. Laying pipelines probably is the easiest, though that will take much of our resources, financial resources. But the more important is we may lay the pipeline, but from where the water will come into those pipes, that is something that we need to worry about. And remember, if you provide water through pipes, every household will also generate a drain, and that will flow a dirty water. How do we resolve that? And this is where we are suggesting we need to have a completely different approach for this. Presently what we do is we have a centralized approach, and as I said, most of the cities we import water over more than 50 kilometers or so, and also take our sewage not less than 20, 30, 40 kilometers, and create sewage treatment plants downstream. And then if you are talking about reuse and recycle, that is something which is not feasible. And that is where we need to change this approach, and slowly we are in a position to implement that, and that is what we call it as a decentralized. And the treatment aspect also has to be thought of properly. We have very extreme positions, like either we say everything will be treated in a sewage treatment plant, and we will develop reuse, recycle quality water, and we have made some guidelines also that every locality should treat their water and reuse it for, if nothing else, flushing toilets. But this kind of thing has not worked. Most of the places we have seen, whether it is in Bangalore or Jaipur or many places, okay, because it is impossible to treat completely on a sustainable basis. So what we are proposing is we need to use optimal combination of sewage treatment and the nature-based treatments. Okay, and that is where we are suggesting a 4-layer treatment rather than just one, and distribute that treatment capacity optimally. So first is of course the sewage treatment. Second is use the natural wetland or natural based system, and then throw that water into the water bodies to maintain the water bodies, and then for water requirement use that water, treat it in the water treatment plant, and then reuse it, rather than directly using the sewage which is treated. And I will show you example of this which is a very high level. So I'll show you a short video, and then that is where I'll end. Okay. So watch that video. So this is a illustration of this concept of things at a very small level, that is at the household level. So this is the video. Welcome to my residence in the IIT Kanpur campus. I have been living in this house for more than 25 years now, and to the extent possible we have tried to make this residence quarter as much environment friendly as possible, and I will give you the glimpses of that. Before that, let's have a round of the premises of this quarter. So this is the entrance, and that's the entrance to the residence. On the front side as well as on the back side, rear side, we have the space for the garden. The rooftop is also made green. This is with the intention, because if you have the concrete top, it radiates heat, it absorbs heat, and then there is higher temperature inside the house. So to avoid that, to eliminate that, we have made this green at the top, that is the lawns. It does not absorb that much of radiation, and also does not heat up, and as a result of that if the rooftop is cool, you also have less heat inside the house during the hot summers. So that's the rear side garden, and this is the front side garden, which is split into two parts through the entrance. Uh, this is the north direction, this is the south direction, this is the eastern side, and that's the western side. So you can say this is the northern boundary, this is the southern boundary, this is the southwest corner, this is the western side, and this is the eastern side. One can take a round of the entire residence. You can enter here. There is a walkway which is adjacent, which is paved one, adjacent to the house, and you can go here, and you can also see taking walk. Both morning walk, evening walk you can take. In addition to that, along the border also, as you can see, this green patch, this is also made for the walking purpose. So you can easily take a walk in the morning. And this corner that you see, this is the southwest corner. This is where we have a provision for treating the wastewater or the sewage that gets generated in this house, as well as in the outhouse that we have. So it's collected by gravity, and then it is treated and reused for the gardening purposes. Then on the other corner, that is the southeast corner, we do the solid waste processing, and that also we will see soon. So we will now have a look. This is how it looks from the top. This is the other house. This is the adjacent house that you have, that is on the eastern side, that is under this. So now we are at the ground. So this is just the front side of the residence. This is the western boundary. We have a garage there. There is a mango tree. You can see there is a bumper crop this time. Then we have along the western border flowers, different kinds of plants. This is the northern boundary, that's the entrance side. Just outside we have the road. So we have combination of various seasonals as well as permanent plants. This is close to the residence side. This of course is a seasonal, and you can see the paved surface where we can take walk. So this is on the side. We can now walk onto this and go to the rear side of the house. So that's the rear side. This is the western boundary on the rear side. That's the southwest corner where we have the provision for treating the wastewater. And then of course we grow lots of vegetables within the premises using the treated wastewater. So the entire garden is freed. The lawns that you have does not use any water, so we do not water in these lawns. Yet it gives an effect of green lawns, and also gives you all the advantages that one would have of the green lawns. And so on the rear side garden, we also have the cradle for the kids. So this is the facility for treating household sewage within the premises itself. So this is the southwest corner or premises, and you can see this as a facility. We will take a closer view, but this is how it looks like nobody would imagine that this serves as a wastewater treatment plant. Let's have a more closer look and details of this plant. This tank that you see here, this is the tank that is used for storing treated water, and that water is then used in the entire garden for various purposes. So this is the closer look at this. The front canal that you see, that is the root zone part of the treatment. The treatment is the sewage is received in the well. This is the central well that you have. The sewage is received by gravity into this, like you see these pipes here. So one pipe is for the entry of the treated water back into the well, and on this side we have the raw sewage that is coming in. So that's the raw sewage that is coming in, and there is only mechanical part is the submersible pump that you have. And then through the submersible pump, the whatever wastewater that is received is pumped, and then it is split into two parts. Some part of the flow goes into this is the central fountain, and that is the fountain which is on the rear side of the facility. So this is more like a waterfall. Both the purposes of these falls and the fountain is essentially to achieve aeration. So you can see the aeration is achieved, and then at the bottom of the base of the central fountain, you see that's the media that is packed. So the water after aeration is trickles through this media, and so this system serves as an attached growth system. The water through the biological means, the organic matter is consumed, and the treated waste falls back into the well. So in a way, well is a completely mixed kind of system. And on the periphery, what you see here, this is the root zone system that typically helps in removal of the nutrients. So what happens is, the part of the water which goes into the rear side fountain, that also helps in aeration, and then it comes into this channel. Through this channel it comes here, and then part of the water flows through the root zone system and gets treated and comes back into the well, and the remaining part, the excess water, is what you see outside is the channel. This is actually a channel which simulates a river. Okay, so that's basically a simulated river, and that river gets water which is nothing but the treated water, treated sewage from this system. So the excess water that goes into this channel and the flow of this again falls back into the water. So in a way you can say this is a kind of completely mixed system. At the same time, different components have their different purposes. So this is the night view of how the aeration takes place, and then you can also see how the aquatic life is maintained in this river system. It is now almost over a year that been operating this. We have turtles, we have fishes in this particular channel surviving very well. So that's the simulated channel river. You can see the turtles there. You can't see the fishes because fish don't come onto the top for us to take a photograph. So that's the complete system, and then that's the walkway around this. There is no smell issue or odor issue. Okay. And then we also regularly test this. So that's the table where we do regular testing for the dissolved oxygen in water. And the dissolved oxygen is tested in the well, in the channel, because that's very important for the fish and the turtle to survive. So this is the view again of the entire treatment system, and we can see the various labels, various components here. This pipe that you see here, that is marked here, that is the treated wastewater, which is filled into the tank that you saw, and then it is used for various activities in the garden. This is the root zone system. It is filled with gravel, and the two different kinds of plants are used. And as the water passes through, there is a lot of biological activity inside. So this is basically a artificial wetland, you can call it, or you can call it root zone system. That is the central fountain, which is used for aeration, part of the flow, and that's the fountain which is more like a waterfall. And both these fountains serve the purpose of aerating the wastewater. Then you see the media here. The purpose of the media is the aerated water, aerated wastewater trickles down through the media, and that serves as an attached growth system. So that's responsible for removal of some of the organic matter as well as the nutrients. And the well, the purpose of the well is to basically receive the wastewater, the raw sewage by gravity, and also the entire water that is pumped is recycled back into this. So the well, in a way, on an average, is a completely mixed system, and the quality almost everywhere is more or less the same because of the completely mixed nature. And this is the channel that you see, and this channel is like an artificial simulated river where you just saw the aquatic life surviving. So this is a attempt to treat sewage at the domestic level for the purpose of reuse of water. And I believe we can extend this kind of concept to the community level or in residences which are big, like for example in Delhi and many places we have such huge residences, and instead of carrying their wastewater away, we can treat those wastewaters and also make this into a facility which is aesthetically very good. And this goes very well with the four-layer or four-stage treatment that we talk about. And that is the first layer is the artificial or the electromechanical system. So you can call this as one variety of the electromechanical system. This you can call it simulated wetland. So that's more like a natural. So that's the second layer. And after this there is a river body, so that's the third layer. And then you take water from here, and then before we want to use it for next use, either it can be used untreated, or if it requires further enhancement in the quality, so then that can be done in a plant similar to water treatment. And that's what is referred to as the four-stage treatment for reuse and recycle purposes. So this is the compost plant or plant for processing solid waste, the waste that comes out from the kitchen as well as the waste that comes out from the garden, solid waste, except the plastic, metallic, or the one which is hazardous waste, that is separated, but all the green waste is processed here. You see these are the two bins, and we use this alternatively. So when one is getting filled, okay, other one is getting used for composting purposes. So it is used in rotation, and it takes about 3 to 4 months for the process to complete. The drums that you see here, we do not mix the kitchen waste and the garden waste, because these two are very different characteristics. So kitchen waste is very small in quantity, so that is composted in the drums. Okay, so there are two stages. One is the pre-composting, and the second stage is the vermicomposting. So that this bin that you see here, that's the vermicomposting bin, and we will get the details of this soon. So it's a very small plant. So that is the kitchen waste, which is put after shredding into the drum. We also use indigenously prepared microbial culture, and then the leachate from that itself is also a good soil enhancer. So that's the garden waste. It is just kept here, and the treated wastewater is used to moisten this. It takes about 3 4 months, so slowly it gets filled. So this is the empty one after the pre-compost has been removed from here. And then the pre-composting, after pre-composting, it is fed into the bins. So those are the earthworms. These are the cocoons of the earthworm. So you can see the earthworms very happily multiply into the composted waste. So these are the earthworms and the cocoons together, and they are part of the, this is the vermi bin. So that is how I get. And the vermicompost is of a very good quality, and this is used as a soil enhancer. Okay, so all the vegetables that are grown, that's the garlic in the winter. Then we have the eggplants. We also have the tomatoes, vegetables which are required for our day-to-day consumption. Of course, we get it from our garden itself. That's the coriander powder, coriander. These are the tomatoes, and during the winter time, we also have the cabbage. You can see that is adjacent or in front of the sewage treatment plant that you just saw. So that's the cabbage. So this is a good example of how we can make our residences more environment friendly, and close the loop at the local level to the extent possible. So I think uh, I will stop at this stage. Exceeded the time limit little bit, but if you still have some time for question answers or any comments, most welcome to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for this very inspiring presentation.